Welcome to the last session of the day. We have Tony Hall, Director General of the BBC, Andrew Griffith, Group COO of Sky and CFO. Big job. David Abrahams, Chief Executive of Channel 4, Dido Harding, Chief Executive of TalkTalk, and Tom Mockridge, Chief Executive of Virgin. So these are the big bosses. They are going to share their reflections on the day. I think I'll just start by quickly asking you any reflections on what the Minister has just said.
I think the stress actually on diversity is right. I think diversity, social diversity, regional diversity in a post-Brexit Britain, I think is really, really important. I mean, he mentioned that. We first met when I was launching an apprentice scheme. We had local radio apprentices from all over the country, people who wouldn't be able to afford to come and work in London or wouldn't have the contacts, but were getting a training from us, and they've gone on to do successful things. So I think that's important. You can see also, I think the importance of soft power as they see it, for, again, in a post-Brexit world, how we can actually make sure that what we do and what we do brilliantly carries on being brilliant to the rest of the world. I mean, there are big questions around that mind.
Andrew?
Yeah, look, in the interest of time, not a lot. I think he's dead right to talk about the intersection and the nexus between the digital economy and the creative economy. That's what we're all playing with and trying to make a reality of every day. And in that, not overlooking the role of infrastructure. And that's something we can come back to. But there's no point in us making the most wonderful programs, having the most engaging experiences, if consumers can't actually experience them because we've got an aging infrastructure.
We are going to be coming back to infrastructure. I know Dido has plenty to say on it, and I'm sure Tom does. David, any
I thought it was
immediate...
a really positive opening statement to our industry, very upbeat, very supportive. I can't help but feel sort of longingly at Tony's 11-year security into the future and hope that it won't be too long before I might be in the same situation.
What, running the BBC?
No. Channel 4 would know about its future.
I was about to say he didn't mention Bake Off, which is a big plus. Anyway.
We're coming to that. We're coming to that as well.
Don't mention the war.
Okay.
Maybe I was going to make the infrastructure point, and I will hold my fire for a second. I think one of the reflections I would make is I think we've heard from the Minister this government's real passion for delivering for everyone. Littered through the speech and in each of the policy areas he covered, the important role we've all got in uniting the country and bringing everyone on the digital journey.
And I would say great sentiments like the rest of the panel. I think in terms of the digital policy across the public sector in the United Kingdom, I see it as a bit of a muddle, frankly. So hopefully the rhetoric that Matt showed us today and that I know Karen Bradley also shares will be followed up with some more firm action.
Okay. So this session is called Fit for the Future. And when I was talking to Andrew on the phone the other day, I thought he made a really good quote or a really good point. And he said, where you've come from in the past isn't as important as where you're going to. So I want to ask each of the panellists where they're going to with their particular organisations and what they feel their unique offering to the consumer or viewer is. So this time I'll start on the left-hand side with Tom.
Well, I think from the point of view of Virgin Media and Liberty Global, my controlling shareholder, we are switching this business unambiguously to a growth business, which is a change for the historic Virgin Media formed from NTL Telewest, fundamentally around broadband and the point that was made by Matt, by many people on the panels today, the enabler of the creative industries and this huge expansion in the market has been possible because broadband has expanded so rapidly. And really our mission, our opportunity, sure, right across our business, multiple business lines, but really to actually make the superfast and the broadband really deliver, because it's often a label rather than fact, and to put that competitive pressure on BT, because I think we all know that the best way to get a better service from BT is to live in a street served by Virgin Media.
Dido.
Where do we go from there?
Good segue.
TalkTalk exists to demonstrate that you don't have to pay a premium for speed. To take the fight back to Mr. Mockridge, that actually We think there is a space for a value for money provider in the connectivity market that gives you phone and broadband, TV and mobile, where you're not trying to protect a premium, that you're genuinely offering great value for money in all of those. What that means in the TV context is it means allowing people to choose from the amazing array of different content providers that we have in the UK, to be everybody's best friend. I genuinely don't mind which channel Bake Off is on, so long as my customers can watch it somewhere. And I think there are a meaningful group of customers, consumers in the UK, who want to access the content they want rather than the full fat packages that maybe my competitors offer.
Well, Channel 4 is a globally preeminent commission of challenging programming, and the thing that really distinguishes it is it does so in so many genres, whether it's news and current affairs, documentaries, film, comedy, factual programming in sport, we've just seen with the Paralympic Games, the ability to use the medium of television to really challenge and move society forward. So as long as we keep that front and center of our core purposes, I think, will have a very long future. However, as with everyone, we are blending that with profound changes in the consumption patterns of consumers, and we feel we are traveling on that journey at the right speed to how the consumers' thoughts are changing and behaviors are changing. And for me, I think the thing we're talking about a lot at Channel 4 at the moment is this balance in investing in technology to personalize the discovery of the content versus the role of human curation to discover this immense library of content that we also can provide to viewers, and what's the balance between the two. So I think the future could be about less explosive change of technology and platforms. You know, the Black Mirror is now in our lives. It's really going to be to do with how we use it and how we combine the technology and the creativity in ever more profound ways.
I'm surprised you mentioned Black Mirror.
It was a subliminal message. It rippled through the room.
It's now in Netflix's life, but not Channel 4's. Andrew.
But for us, it's growth today and growth tomorrow. It's growth on multiple fronts. I mean, frankly, if we as industry leaders cannot grow our businesses at a time when consumers have so much choice and devices has gone frictionless and consumers can consume so much more of what they want, then we should all just get out of the way. It's about deploying capital sensibly to pursue growth. So I'm very proud that over the last 2 years, Sky has become a UK headquartered leader in Europe. We're the largest pay and entertainment business now in continental Europe, and I'd hope we continue to grow. And it's about being very broad. So in this world, it's about not just relying on a single source of revenue, because that imperils the future and your ability to invest and follow eyeballs, but actually have the broadest range of that horrible word, monetization strategies. But subscription has its place, advertising, targeted advertising, opening up new opportunities for advertisers, and going into transactional space as well. So if we can do all of those things, and we can do them increasingly to more consumers and across more markets, taking advantage and turning Brexit into an opportunity, then we'll continue to grow in the future.
And Tony?
3 things. I mean, it's about programs, it's about programs, it's about programs. I think what won the charter, lots of policy debates, lots of policy arguments, very clever people doing X, Y, Z. Actually, it's about 2 things. One is it's our audiences and the extraordinary warmth for them, for the BBC, and what it stood for. Why is that? Because of the programs we do across radio and television. So number 1, programs. Number 2 is culture. I want a more diverse BBC, but I also want a simpler BBC. I think we've made lots of strides in that, but there's a lot more work to do to make it a place where people really want to come and do the best work of their lives. That's 2. And 3, it's global. I think the opportunity of the BBC with World Service, with more money coming into World Service from the government, is great. I think the opportunity to build on what we do in radio and take that globally, much more than we do with simply World Service, but with some of the brilliant content on Radio 4, Radio 3, Radio 2, etc., is actually very big. We've begun to exploit that. There's so much more to do. And thirdly, on that global, also building those genres where we know we can match the world globally and go toe-to-toe and really take what we do, which is great, out to the world. And I think that global point was picked up by Matt Hancock. I think that's really important for us in the Britain we are now in.
I know you're happy with the licence fee settlement, but there are some elements of it which I guess you're not as happy with as others. Transparency of pay for artists, and maybe having to tender all your programmes at a time when, some of your competitors here, even Virgin now is moving into original content. Sky, more than ever, into original content.
Yeah, I mean, the 150K, we all know what my feelings are on that. I think it made it absolutely clear 2 weeks ago when the government published the Charter and Agreement. I just think it's wrong, you know, but there we are. We put the argument, we fought it, and it's one of the things we lost, but we won an awful lot. On the competition, that's why owning IP, the BBC being a programme maker, that's why studios really matters, and it matters we get a proper level playing field and we get that right, because actually I don't want to be a publisher broadcaster. That's what Channel 4 does, and very good. But actually what I believe at the core of the BBC, we're programme makers, and I want us to build on that. And I think in the era when the government's saying, rather again the way other parts of the industry is moving outside the UK, but leave that to one side, we want to open you up for competition, then I think the studios for me is saying, all right, we'll agree to that, but only if we can have a level playing field and compete ourselves with the programme making skills we've got.
But wouldn't you say that Bake Off illustrated more than anything the importance of the BBC owning its own IP? ITV has been buying up production companies here and abroad, and obviously is leaning towards commissioning more and more from a bigger in-house, if you like, sector.
There was a welcome groan from over here when we mentioned Bake Off earlier on, and I completely agree. But one point about Bake Off for me, which I think is spot on, which is Bake Off is about IP, and we've got to develop our own IP, and the challenge for us now, not just with Mary and Mel and Sue, but with others, is to develop IP. And we all know that's really, really hard. There's no magic wand here. You're relying on really talented people coming up with really good ideas that you back and commission us back. And that's the nexus we've got to, that's the thing we've got to deliver in the next
But how are you going to get
years.
those talented people into studios when you're being forced to give some of the most valuable shows away?
Because I actually believe studios will win. I believe studios in the competition will win. I'm not someone who thinks, gosh, it's all open to competition, you know, hold up a white flag. When I see what Mark Lindsay is doing in studios, really energising the programme makers there and really leading the programme makers there, I've got a strong belief in studios that, I mean, you know, I'm sure we'll lose one or two things, but actually I believe in the long term this is the right future for in-house. What we were facing when I came back from in-house was a gradual decline in the amount of production done by in-house. I wanted to stop that. And the way to stop that is to say, okay, we'll get out there, we'll be more competitive in a not-for-profit sense, and get out there and incentivize, you know, us, because we'll be in that market, to go and make some great programs. And some of the ideas I hear that they're talking about, not just in cookery, but elsewhere as well, I think are really cracking ideas, and I want to see them on the air.
David, James Purnell in the last session said that he felt that Channel 4 should be more closely regulated, and that Bake Off showed that Channel 4 should be more closely regulated.
Look, I think it's unhelpful to sort of politicise what is the system working. We have a PSB competition between all the players. We all have different models, and there's some competition that's occurred on a very high-profile show. The reality is that, having done my job now for 6.5 years, is that we feel that we have a close and meaningful and detailed relationship with Ofcom, our regulator. It involves regular conversations, not just as in their role as a referee of what we're doing from a standards point of view, but also meaningfully tracking in detail how we are delivering the remit that Parliament gives us. And there's been some really innovative thinking that broadcasters from around the world come and study as to how we actually monitor that. Now, my understanding is that the BBC is about to go towards a transition from a trust oversight model to an Ofcom model, and I'm sure that there's a lot of work that now needs to be done to make that transition. And we would love to share in detail with the BBC, with James, and you know, obviously Tony was on our board for many years and is familiar with how that evolved over time, so that we can be properly accountable to Parliament and to the public for delivering the remit that we've been given. And I think that the regulation to us is granular and is very apparent.
I mean, Tony, did you agree with what James said, that Channel 4 should be more tightly regulated?
Look, I've sat on the Channel 4 board for 9 years. I believe in Channel 4. What?
You were involved in hiring me.
I was involved in hiring, that's true. I'd forgotten that bit. I think we've got to be so careful, and David is right. The way in which we are regulated by Ofcom matters. We've got a unitary board, big plus, because I mean that will take away an awful lot of the sort of bring a lot of clarity to who's responsible for what. Then it matters the relationship of the BBC then to Ofcom, and I think you've got to be very careful with regulating things like distinctiveness or how much you want from this particular region versus that region, or how much you want on comedy versus X or versus Y, because actually that's not how creative organisations should run. So there's a tension there. I saw it work at Channel 4. I thought it worked very well, and I hope we can take some of the lessons from that into the way we make it work with the BBC.
Okay. Dido, let's move on a bit to the broadband spectrum. So I think in your view, we are all going to be watching content via high-speed broadband.
Yes, this might be very contentious. I don't know whether it's in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, but at some stage, all video content will be transmitted into people's homes via fibre optic cables. It's easily the best way in terms of physics and the lowest cost, and actually the only way that we're going to ever meet the insatiable demand for people to watch more and more video on multiple devices in the home. So I think that we should all really care about the digital infrastructure, and we should be really very worried that the country's current digital infrastructure doesn't deliver at all.
And your view on BT Openreach?
I think that's reasonably well known. I wanted to pick up on something that Tom said, which I think is interesting. Tom's point that the best way to get the best out of BT is to have Virgin going down the street. Well, as one of BT's largest customers, I see no improvement because there is Virgin next to BT in the 50% of the country in BT's Openreach's current performance, not least because I, as BT's customer, can't move my services to Virgin. So I don't think that is solving the problem at all. Andrew and I and others have been very vocal in saying that we think that a step along the journey is to create a separate Openreach, genuinely and properly separate, so that it's clear and visible what they are and are not doing. The fact that we can have a literally endless argument about whether or not BT has funded sports right purchases from Openreach profits because it's completely opaque what their accounting actually is, tells you that the current world is not good. I could keep going on, but I think in the end, I would hope we do all agree that Britain's broadband infrastructure today isn't good enough. We've managed, together with Sky and Vodafone and much smaller operators, to encourage and spark a movement. Nearly 100,000 people have contacted Ofcom in the last 6 weeks saying, please separate Openreach and sort this out. That's more people contacting Ofcom about this than they did about charter renewal or they did about Leveson. It's not been hard to whip up the fury because the fury is real. And so I do think that all of us, we might disagree on how you solve the problem, but the problem is a big one for this industry because it will, over time, be the medium through which our end consumers watch all of our content.
And what's the solution you would like?
I believe in competition. So I'd like a level playing field with a complete, if you were starting with a blank sheet of paper, you would not have the owner of the nation's core infrastructure be the retail competitor of that infrastructure's other customers. So I do think that it's nonsense to suggest it's too complicated to separate out BT's pension, which appears to be the only remaining argument. I think you need to have a properly independent Openreach. I think then, by the way, you can impose a universal service obligation on that entity. And I, for one, and I can't speak for others in the industry, would then be much more comfortable with either a broadband levy or government subsidy going into that properly independent entity to sort out the rural broadband not spots and urban not spots. And then, heaven forbid, you might actually find John Petter from BT and I and Andrew all investing together to build an alternative infrastructure, or Openreach investing together with Sky. At the moment, none of us can do that because one of our biggest competitors is our largest supplier.
What do you feel about that, Andrew?
Look, I think I agree with Dido. I think she makes a very eloquent case, and obviously she and I think very deeply about this on behalf of customers. I mean, ultimately, all of these conversations are not about how an industry structure is organised, but they're about how you deliver to customers. The Minister was very clear about access being a key priority. On BT, the structural separation has to be a when, not an if. there are two irreconcilable objectives with a retail consumer business, relatively cyclical, fighting for share in a very competitive market, and the nation's solitary infrastructure that is desperately underinvested and needs to attract outside capital. And separating those into two vibrant FTSE 100 companies, each able to pursue their own objectives, readily achievable, as Dido says, just has to be the way forward. And we've been talking about it candidly way too long on platforms like this to consumers out there. 50%, I think, of consumers, Dido, polled say that the nation's biggest single infrastructure priority shouldn't be building another airport, shouldn't be building more power stations, should be getting the nation's broadband infrastructure right. And so I want to move on, because that's a debate that actually we've all rehearsed way too often, and it's now decision time. And it's a decision time in the context of Brexit and how we take all of our digital economies forward. But just coming back to the discussion between Tony and David, our business is laser-like focused on customers. And that's what drives our content decisions. I mean, it's interesting, it's important exactly how we structure the industry and who owns the IP. But all of that is actually subordinate to the point of getting that IP on screen, giving consumers more of what they want. We're fantastically lucky with our diverse revenue streams to be able to produce niche programming like Sky Arts and mass programming across the rest of our platform. And to do that, serving 12 million households in the UK, now 21 million households in Europe. But the industry, to a degree, has to stop talking to itself a little bit about some of these issues and actually focus on customers.
So, Tom, you seem to have formed a bit of an unholy alliance with BT now.
Come and explain yourself.
I certainly wouldn't call it an alliance, but in fact, Dido's frightened me this evening, because I could see the elements of the debate before, but now the concept is talking about putting more subsidy into Openreach. And the very point, the perspective that I come from is that we are building fibre to the premise in an alternative infrastructure for the United Kingdom. This has been funded by a private sector company, an international company, fundamentally American shareholders, but widely held. And that's been done without state subsidy. I mean, this is the gold standard outcome, that you've got the private sector investing in state-of-the-art technology, driving an incumbent to do better, offering, certainly, as I'm sure you agree, much greater service itself. It's a time to stop looking for subsidy and let private money take the burden. My mission is to get my shareholders, John Malone, Mike Freeze, to actually not only continue with the £3 billion commitment made, I want to be making that phone call for the next £3 billion and driving that even faster. I can't do that if they pick up a copy of the Times or whatever it is, and there it is that the public sector, the government, has intervened to take away an existing private sector asset. So I think there's a big balance in what you want there. If you want the state to do most things, that's a solution. And maybe up until 2008, that was unacceptable. But frankly, I don't see that the state has the capability to do this.
Tom, I think we might agree more than you think, in that I'm not suggesting for a moment that the state will fund the build-out of fibre to the premise to 100% of the country. By the way, we're at about 2% today. I'm suggesting that the not spots, where I'm assuming you're not about to go to the 95% that don't have anything today, your build-out is in the areas where broadly people have some form of broadband. So I think there's a mixture. We want to have as competitive a market as we possibly can to build proper fibre networks. So Andrew and I are working together in York, building 1 gig for £21.70. If you live in York, you get proper broadband. It works for every device, whenever you want it, for £21.70 a month. And I think that a level playing field where you're building out as fast as you can, Openreach are building out as fast as they can, I am, maybe Sky is, that will deliver for maybe 80-90% of the country. But unless you're about to announce that you're going to fill those not spots in the next year or two, I think we also have to work out how you do deliver to the rural communities that don't have anything today. And if you can commercially, get on and do it quickly, because they're furious that we're not delivering it today.
David?
Look, this is clearly a really complex public policy issue, but I think I just put in a plea as a public service broadcaster that we do actually have a very robust reliable, effective and efficient distribution system for our channels called Freeview, which is very widely distributed, and we see a long future for it because we do see an interrelationship between what Matt Hancock was talking about, which is a high-quality public service content, news, current affairs, contributing to the public discourse that is free at the point of consumption and isn't gate-kept by anyone other than the providers of those signals. So for us, the future is remaining very hybrid. We still have huge amounts of linear consumption that are creating the cultural impact that we're all producing as broadcasters. And so whilst I recognise this is an important debate, let's also recognise what the end game is for private companies, which is that they will become the gatekeepers of public service content in the future, and that is a massive public policy issue.
So with mechanisms like Sky Q and personalisation, which I think Virgin is moving towards as well, is that going to shunt the public service broadcasters off the front page? Because they've had due prominence on the EPG, and now when you go into a platform with little boxes on it, which you can just click on, you could put anything there, and you can be 3 boxes away from Channel 4 or BBC.
Yeah. Well, from our case, absolutely not. The due prominence we adhere to on all of our platforms. Ultimately, and I don't think David and Tony would say any different, ultimately the content you want to present to customers is the content they want. I mean, ultimately, if you put too many interfaces, consumers will reject that. But we'd have due prominence on all of our platforms. Unlike, actually, there's not a level playing field in the regulation in this space. Unlike a lot of the West Coast digital platforms, who are our primary competitor for Mind Time with the Home, you'll have a very interesting conversation talking to Apple or YouTube or Google about due prominence for UK PSBs. But for Sky's part, we absolutely do that.
And if you say that the public service broadcasters are very important to your customers,
they are, yeah.
Are you going to consider paying them for being on your platform?
No, because they're available free to air, so they're not paid for on any platform. They're broadcast in the clear, free to air without paywalls on any other network. So.
But if you benefit because consumers are driven to Sky because you are broadcasting Channel 4, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, should there not be carriage fees? Because I think with Section 73 of the Copyright Act,
which applies to cable, not to satellite.
Oh, not to you. Okay.
No, it doesn't apply to us. But when we are a common carrier. We're a facility. We're an open platform. We carry many channels, not just the PSBs that are broadcast free to air. They source their own satellite capacity, and our equipment can receive that, just as they do a fantastic job broadcasting themselves in the clear over the web and over UHF spectrum.
So Tom, Section 73 does apply to you.
It does, but again, look, maybe another example of a muddle in the policy framework. But I think the point Andrew just made, that even if it doesn't apply to Sky has made the constant practice of having the PSB channels in their prominent position without charge. And remember this, our major programming partners are Channel 4, Sky, BBC, BBC Worldwide, ITV, that we are a conduit for the whole ream of and the great choice that the industry makes in the United Kingdom. So there is a partnership approach here, and that partnership extends to extending this great network so people can get that great broadband and see everything both in its linear and on-demand formats. There's a whole ecosystem that's working together there to drive everything forward.
I think we know, don't we, that actually this is an area where it sounds very simple in one sense when we sit up here and talk about it, but we know actually the battles and the conversations and the negotiations that go on are actually very tough, but they really matter. And I think the issues of prominence will not go away. On the Sky Q box at the moment, I think you have to go 4 clicks or something like that before you get to something which resembles a Channel 4 or whatever. I think the issues of attribution really, really matter. You want to know where the contents come from and that you can get to it easy. And for us, it's a big issue of disaggregation. Actually, a linear channel still matters, or an iPlayer still matters. These are important, and they're important ways in which our audiences, our consumers, want to consume us. So that for us is, those 3 things are immensely difficult, lots of negotiations and difficulties around that, but are vital, I think, from the point of view of the BBC or indeed a Channel 4.
I think what we've got to do is be careful not to muddle two concepts. One is due prominence in terms of linear and editorially curated recommendation pages. It is true that the Sky Q device, which consumers choose, by the way, no one's forced to have, the Sky Q platform is one of the first to effectively respond to customers' demands for a non-linear world. And none of us are going to be able to sit here and insist that consumers choose to consume only by looking at a linear programming guide. It's the television equivalent of insisting that we use gas lights. Due prominence, however, endures both through those editorial curations and when a consumer does choose themselves to go into a linear EPG, due prominence is there. So we have an industry issue that we all share about how we respond to consumers who want to respond in lots of different ways, who will sometimes aggregate content, sometimes they'll disaggregate content and go straight to Netflix or straight to the iPlayer with due prominence, which shouldn't ever really get in the way of the consumer experience, but which should surface and does surface the PSB content in the same way as it always has.
So if it becomes an irritant, i.e. your consumers can't find the BBC or Channel 4, you'll move it. But, you know, human nature being what it is, you tend to click on what you see rather than scrolling through.
Well, human nature what it is, human nature responds over time. So as we have a proliferation of devices, as millennials grow up with very different consumption patterns, then we as an industry have a choice, which is we can adapt with that. We can find new ways for consumers to find and navigate. We can personalize our content. We can build recommendation engines. Those of us who haven't had a direct relationship with customers in the past will build for the first time a direct relationship. And if you look at what David's done, I'm sure that's a fantastic way of consumers discovering your content and you alerting them to the fact that there's new PSB content available on all sorts of platforms, of which Sky is only one of them. So I think we've just got to decide how we're going to respond to that and innovate. I actually don't think, not that, I mean, we adhere to due prominence, but I don't think trying to legislate and lock in and codify a past viewing behavior is going to be the right way forward. It may or may not reach temporal advantage, but it's not going to be the way forward to compete with all of the other devices, all of which fall outside of the debate that we would have here and the legislative framework under which Sky and Virgin and others operate. That's where this industry is being defined from. It's on the West Coast.
Isn't one of the good things about this that consumers have got real choice? They can choose the Sky Q EPG, they can choose the UView EPG, they can choose the Virgin EPG, they can choose the Freeview EPG, and all of the different content that goes with it. And I think one of the things that's very important is that it is easy for households to switch between those platforms, otherwise they are stuck with something that they don't like. And we're all learning because the amazing expanse of content is mind-bogglingly difficult to navigate as a family. And actually there's a real competitive advantage as a provider of a television platform to have a means of accessing and curating that works for your customers. It's why we in TalkTalk really love the UView platform and the work that we've done. You know, there is a great mini-series to be written one day about the making and running of UView with all its characters and 7 partners. But actually, the involvement of the PSBs in that's been integral to creating something that is very, very user-friendly.
And how are we going to compete, you know, with the likes of Netflix? Are we any further forward, Tony, with Britflix, was it being called?
Well, talks go on, don't they? I'm not going to say any more than that, other than I think you know exactly what I think, which is, you know, we know we're in an on-demand world where people want box sets. We have great content, others have great content. You know, we're talking about how we best provide that, because I go back, our audiences want that. Our audiences know they want BBC content as well as other people's content. We want to provide that. But, you know, as I say, it's an area I want to move into. I think that's quite well known.
David, are you
Well,
involved?
all four's a £100 million business for us now, and we're going to continue to invest in it. The new announcements about upgrades coming in the next few months. I mean, it fascinates me now where this whole AI conversation is going to go next and how it interacts with program discovery and program choice, because this idea of temporal discovery, you can, you know, the way our team is working internally now is completely revolutionary, because they are linking characters from new dramas, let's say National Treasure Tonight, to appearances in shows that go back to the 34-year history of Channel 4. And now that's really interesting. You're combining sort of machine learning with curation at a level that we've never seen before. This clearly is where investment, innovation, talent has to focus in our industry. This is the theme of this conference. We are all in different ways very engaged in that. And we do not see Netflix or anyone else as an existential threat to an organization that has at its heart this immense muscle to creatively judge what society wants next and to have that kind of cultural impact, which Channel 4, whether it's film, whether it's comedy, whether it's reinventing Paralympics, has an extraordinary creative muscle and a muscle power to do that. And so I always come back to that thing we often say at events like this, which is if you've got that, all the technology bits are solvable. And they are challenging, and how you invest between technology and content is challenging, definitely. But we don't see anything out there as a silver bullet. Channel 4's always innovated in commercially, technically, and creatively, and we see this as a very exciting opportunity for us and our business model.
But the thing, in a way, I suppose, for both the BBC and Channel 4, and in some ways for you guys, is that I'm now used to the fact that on Netflix, if I want to, I can binge watch. And when I watched National Treasure last week, I wanted to watch the next one, and I can't. And when I watched The Night Manager, I wanted to watch the next one or two or three, and I can't. So how far are we?
I don't buy that now there's a law that says all drama has to be binge-watched. I'm in season 2 of Narcos, and actually I'm spending 13 hours of my life watching a man being chased, and I know what the end is, he's going to get killed. And actually, it's actually a meaningless, it's a meaningless use of my time, I have found. Whereas I know that tonight, there are going to be 3 or 4 million people that will want to watch Robbie Coltrane tonight, because it's been put on at the right time, it's in the right mood, it's been brilliantly scheduled, perfectly marketed, and it will have a cultural impact. And let's not go to the black or white either-or future. It is all a hybrid, and the way that we introduce, National Treasure is dealing with an issue that television could not deal with in its history, and it's doing it through drama, through one of our primary dramatists, Jack Thorne, who's just done a Harry Potter play. It is dealing with important things, and it is timed at a moment in the week where it will have cultural impact. Technology is irrelevant to that. It is useful for the further distribution of that cultural artifact, but it is a piece of culture, and that's what Channel 4 has at the heart of it.
But Lorraine, we're moving through a moment in time.
Yes.
Not everyone is going to have all of the answers. Not every format will be fully evolved. Everybody is doing a huge amount of experimentation with windowing and strategies to let consumers enjoy the experience in ways that they want. Some of that will be linear, some of it will be in an entirely non-linear format. And the beauty of this is that consumers are enjoying that experience. They're engaging with it. They're spending more. So none of us have to deal with Netflix in a way. We're just seeing growth in the overall market. You can get Netflix for pence per day. You can subscribe to all of Sky's basic channels for less than £1 a day. It's fantastic value for money. It's fantastic time to be both in producer, because you've got more airtime to fill. You've got more consumption that you can potentially target and address. We're seeing our video consumption go up. You wouldn't often believe when you get together in some of these conferences that video consumption of every flavour, of all flavours that are being made, is actually increasing. So the fact that there's different names and sometimes different players is just a way of servicing different consumer needs. In the same sense, we'd have all walked down 20 years ago the high street, and there'd have been an HMV and a Woolworths and a Blockbuster selling us plastic discs with content on. It's just moved into a much more frictionless age. So we're able to talk about it more and compare and contrast a little bit more easily.
Tom, do you think it's possible to compete now if you don't own content? Because you relatively recently divested yourself of your content business. Now you seem to be moving back into content. You've just done a deal with All 3 where they're going to be making exclusive drama for you, I believe.
Look, certainly it's a small regret of mine that Neil, my predecessor, let go some great programming assets, but he had to, in the circumstance, had to keep the company alive. And if history was rewritten, it might be different. But look, fundamentally, the point I made earlier, we see our programming relationships as partnerships. Most clearly with people here on this platform and with the others in the United Kingdom. We see our objective as offering the widest possible choice. We were the first operator in the world to take Netflix into our box. That was a big debate at the time, and it's turned out it hasn't eaten our lunch. It's offered consumers more choice, and now that's been expanded across the Liberty Global Group. We're pulling more apps in. We want to maximise that choice, and we want to maintain these partnerships. But sure, in addition, and maybe this is a leaf from the Sky book, we would like to have the opportunity to create our own quality drama, make it available in an on-demand format, make it available in co-production, again, maybe with people on the platform here. And we're very lucky with Jane Turton and All 3 Media. We've got a business there with the capability to produce sensational stuff, and we'll come out second half of next year with the first 12-piece top drama, and we probably will allow you to binge it, but it won't be compulsory.
And I mean, you're very much living in the European Brexit world as well. I know we all are, but I mean, you're operating in those markets. You know, your boss, I think, donated £700,000 to the Remain.
£500,000. I've got a minute mind.
Okay, whatever it was, a lot of money to the Remain campaign. How are you finding the immediate aftermath?
Look, the honest answer is, look, in fact, I requested that decision, and I did act within the company to gently persuade my colleagues it was a better choice to stay in. But, you know, the community's made that decision. So, okay, Brexit means Brexit. Sure, we don't know what it means, but it's a fact of life. And look, so far, I've been proven wrong. I mean, the economy so far continues to have strength, to have growth. Okay, there might be uncertainties out there, but you know, I've been proven wrong, and I'm happy to say that.
And with Sky Italia, Sky Deutschland, how are you finding the immediate aftermath?
The same as Tom. We operate largely in 5 individual markets, and most of the regulation that bites is in-market regulation. There's a European layer, and that'll still continue to be something that affects all of our products, because our products will go across the whole suite of markets. But you know, we're very geared to the UK economy. I mean, we want to continue to invest here. We're based here. We're headquartered here. Most of our people are here, and so you know, so far so good.
I mean, Peter Mandelson earlier seemed to say that the creative sector doesn't have a strong enough voice, isn't high enough up the government's agenda, and therefore runs the risk of being used as a trade-off in other negotiations. I mean, Tony, do you think we do have a powerful enough voice?
I think a decade ago, as I said, that's probably true, and certainly when I was working in the arts, you really felt that was true. Actually, I think the creative industries, if you can lump them together in that sort of way, have really got their act together over the last decade. I think there's all sorts of ways now in which we are taken very, very seriously. And all the dealings I've had with government, and you heard it from the Minister just now, says that they understand that. We are one of Britain's great success stories, and we need those success stories, and we should be building on that. And that's, for me, I think one of the really interesting editorial issues or creative issues is about our content. It's about the content that reflects the whole of the UK, both to the UK and also the world. And I think the particular challenge of Brexit is to ensure that we really are reflecting the creativity of all different parts of the UK to the UK and to the world. I find that really exciting. I think we're lucky to be around in such an amazing time to be broadcasting and making programmes.
Okay, well, on that optimistic note, I have to call time, I think. I'd like to welcome back to the stage, well, first of all, I'd like to thank the wonderful panellists for being very frank.